Hello, Stone. Welcome to the broadcast.
Nice to be here, Ole.
Tell me, are you a filmmaker that thrives on controversy?
Not especially. I don't pursue subjects for their controversial nature. I pursue the truth. I'm interested in certain stories as a dramatist. I craft them, co-write them, or I write them, edit them, direct it. And I'm fully embrace it. But I have done crime movies, I've done football movies, I've done Wall Street movies. It's when I've hit some of the political nerves in the country, like sometimes on JFK, who killed him, nerves like on Nixon, some of the Watergate stuff, Mr. Bush, and also Natural Born Killers was a fiction. That was a tremendously controversial, but that was fiction. Right. So it's not like, I don't expect it, but if it comes up, I'm not going to back down from say this is just a movie, I'm sorry.
Right.
I feel that I'm embraced fully into the movie.
But it seems that you made it your business to question power, to challenge authorities, at least.
To question authority is everybody's job, in my opinion. That's the nature of.
Well, not every filmmaker would do that.
I have two hats. One is a citizen, and I do get very angry sometimes when I see decisions that are made by our government that really piss me off. And in the Snowden affair, I was certainly, as a citizen, very happy when he did what he did, because I had many people in my generation had suspicions that the Bush administration had been surveilling people illegally during the Iraq War. And those suspicions were confirmed in 2005 by the New York Times when they finally released the story, the James Risen story about Bush's eavesdropping program. Just want to say that they spiked that story for almost a year and a half. They killed it because it was right before the election. So the newspaper, what I'm trying to say is no, it didn't fit in because Bush would not have been reelected if that story broke. As a result, we got Bush for a second term. Okay. So the Times and the Washington Post and that establishment basically is a corporate media that basically supports the government.
I know you have a deep distrust for the media.
Deep, because I go back to the Vietnam War, I go back to all the lies that were told for us to go with, the Iraq War, the weapons of mass destruction. Don't forget these things. There's a history to this.
Right. And let's talk about that.
Just to finish.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, you asked me that question, and
go ahead.
You said, so why did I get involved in this? And I was saying that the Snowden story was a great story. I was curious as a citizen, not as a dramatist. I passed. When Glenn Greenwald wanted to make the movie of a book, I didn't go for it. I didn't want to get involved. I knew it was a current affairs case, he's under indictment. You know, I don't want to get blown out of the water and the news changes. Who knows what happens? Don't chase the news is what I say. So when I got an invitation from the Russian lawyer who represented him to visit him in Moscow, because the Russian lawyer had written a book and he wanted to sell it, I met with him one time and then I went back. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, and Mr. Snowden wasn't sure either.
No, he was somewhat reluctant.
Of course. Wouldn't you be? Somebody's going to do your life. And I went back 2 more times, and the more I went back, the more he spoke to me and I think trusted me, and he told me things that were amazing. And I started to realize that this is not just the news. This is an important story about anybody in any generation. Going back to ancient Greece, there was probably people like this. Somebody who knows something that the people don't know, and he has to tell them. He becomes the messenger for the truth. And the messenger often, as you know, gets killed in situations like this. So what he did, he had no interest after he delivered the message. He said that to the journalists in the movie and publicly. He said, I have no information. I turned it over to the 3 journalists. It is up to them to look at it, decide what is in the public interest. And he always took that stance. It never changed. So, in other words, he would rather no movie have been made, and he would have disappeared, and the people would have dealt with the information. The information was so complex they didn't understand it. And as a result, as always, these things become gossipy. Always, they focused on the messenger. Yeah.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Okay. Your movie premiered recently in Norway about Ed Snowden. He was gathering. He was collecting all the information that the U.S. government intelligence agencies are collecting, also about ordinary people, ordinary citizens,
the world,
and put it out
the world,
and
not just the U.S., the world.
Yeah.
But by the way, not all the information. He took a slice.
Yeah, that's probably more.
Oh, there's a huge amount. And by the way, I think there's so much more that we don't know. That's what's scary about this whole thing.
Yeah. But you said you were driven sometimes by anger. Was that why you made this particular movie also?
I said they asked me, what keeps you going at the age of 70? And I said, probably anger. And I was thinking back to my whole life, and I think I don't like lies, put it that way. It's not about one government or another. It's just lying to the people disgusts me. And parents lie to children. I found out about my parents' lies. Everyone finds that out, you know. And it angered me because it was a divorce situation. I thought they were together forever. I thought they were a wonderful couple, but I was dead wrong. Everything I'd seen was wrong. There was a surface and there was below the surface. So that woke me up at about 14, 15. And then you go to the schools, you go to the military, you do all these things. You do jobs, you learn as you walk through life. And I have to say, I'm not looking for it, but it seems to me after having done these things, there's a tremendous amount of lying about how a society works, how it comes together to work. In America, because we spend so much money on military, on selling arms too, and on creating a universe that depends on wars and selling weapons and creating a militarization of countries, that we are a warmonger, basically. And
but what is Ed Snowden? Is he a whistleblower? Is he an activist? Or is he a spy?
Well, you changed the subject on me again, but okay. He's a classic definition of a whistleblower. He's hardly a spy, because a spy doesn't give his information away for free to 3 journalists and say, you go and you deal with it as you want. A spy doesn't do that. They're motivated by ideology, which is often, during the Cold War, we saw people like Kim Philby, or they're motivated by greed. There's no money that ever changed hands.
Your government seems to think
well, no, only certain rumors that they insist on smearing his name, of course, because what is the government going to do? They're acting illegally on a massive scale. They're going to deny everything he does. They called him all kinds of things, and they'll never admit to this, ever. But frankly, there should have been, and several federal courts have said it was illegal, what they're doing, but there's always another court somewhere that backs the government. So it's been a very tricky case, and it's been in limbo for 4 years. So nothing has really been done, except for, of course, the companies, the private companies and corporations that worked collaborating with the government have now come to the other side. They say they're not collaborating with the government, and they are selling encryption services, as you know, which is the public. If the public knew this, understood the depth of it, they would all want encryption. But they would go to Germany, they'd go to Norway, they'd go to wherever else they could buy it, because they wouldn't be able to trust the American corporations. So it was a move of self-preservation by the corporations.
But back to Snowden, he would be in some sort of trouble if he was ever to go back to the States, wouldn't you say?
He has said he'd be glad to go back to have a trial. He would face a trial, but not the trial of the U.S. government. It's not a fair trial. It's called the Espionage Act does not allow you to testify on the behalf of the public interest, which is very important, because that's what this case is about. He did steal secrets. He said steal them or whatever, lifted them and made them public. But he was obeying a higher law, he says, the Constitution of the United States, which is one of the Bill of Rights that they broke was your right to protection from search and seizure, unless there's reasonable cause. The government would have to say, you know, you are a terrorist, or you're associated with terrorists, and they'd have to have some evidence, somebody telling the government that you have this capacity, and they would want to investigate you. They have, and I think Snowden, as well as I myself, we're definitely for the right of selected, targeted surveillance. Targeted surveillance. That's what comes up in the movie time and again. This is not targeted. This is mass.
Blanketing.
This is
but
creating a
given
haystack
President
and looking for the
Obama,
pin. What?
I'm sorry, President Obama is revising what is it called, the Phone Metadata Collection Act, and Congress has passed an act, the USA Freedom Act.
Yeah,
so there was a political fallout.
No, what they did was they allow the phone companies. They make the phone companies keep the information for a year or so, or a year and a half, they say.
But there was a political fallout from what he did, and
there was mild government reforms. Listen, the NSA the computers have improved even since 2013. They're building faster computers to break the encryption. Some people are talking about the quantum computer that the NSA has that could crack anything in the world practically. But that's what we always do. We have an arms race. Now that we have the concept of cyber warfare in the air, very important, the concept of breaking other people's codes has become the menu du jour, comme on dit. It's the most important thing. we don't know who, in cyber warfare, as you know, let's talk about that for a moment, because it's very important to the story. Oh, you okay with that? Snowden, at the end of his days, was a cyber operator. He could do offensive and defensive operations. In his Japanese sequence in the movie, you see him in Japan, and he says, the Japanese did not want to tap their population. It was against their ethics. But we tapped them anyway, America, and then we went into their civilian infrastructure and we planted malware in Japan. So we basically laid landmines in their dams, their hydropower complexes.
In
case one day Japan would no longer be our ally.
Right.
And he says the same thing about Mexico and blah, blah, and Austria. And you can imagine in various European countries, I would imagine we've planted a lot of malware. So although we call ourselves allies of these countries, the truth is we have weapons ready to go that will harm this country, planted inside their country. What if I told you Denmark is one of those countries? Would you feel that this is a true alliance with the United States, or is it basically you're a hostage of the United States? Oh, I'm sorry, Norway. What would you say?
You're in Norway now.
What would you say? I mean, I think you have to rethink everything because it's not what it seems. Cyber warfare is very dangerous.
I appreciate that. But my question now would be, isn't there a feeling also in the States that Americans prefer security to personal freedom? Yeah.
Well, in the movie we talk about that. It's the NSA supervisor talks, Americans don't want freedom, they want security.
But isn't that true?
It's a cliche, you know, it's something you throw out in a movie or something like that, but there is a truth to it because Americans don't know, they're not informed by their government, what is security doing for you? So they always say that if we don't surveil the whole world, we'll miss a terrorist. There's no evidence that they've gotten anybody through mass surveillance. They got one taxi driver after they claimed to have 50-some cases of it. That one taxi driver sending $8,000 from, I believe, California, a taxi driver sending it back to El Shabib in Somalia or Sudan, I forgot now. But it was, you know, it's minor. They have no results, and they have never presented the facts to the Americans.
So you mean it's more hurtful than helpful? Is what you're saying.
I think it's hurting us enormously because it's completely confusing. They're spending a fortune. It's a military-industrial complex. They want the money. They create gigantic new storage deposits. They have all kinds of new equipment. We have satellites 22,000 miles above the Earth with antenna the size of the Eiffel Tower peeking in on everybody. Every corner of the Earth is monitored and geolocated. Our drone warfare is amazingly sophisticated.
And you deal with that in your movie
All this comes up, but I want to go back to cyber warfare because it's so dangerous for the world. America started the program. They are the best at it. Maybe the Russians are as good now, but the Americans and the Israelis laid the Stuxnet virus into Iran in 2007. Do you remember that virus? They blew up some centrifuges. The centrifuges were rebuilt in 6 months, but it was basically an act of war against Iran. They thought they'd get away with it. The virus never died. It went into other countries. Other countries studied it. The world is very smart. So other countries figured it out. Iran, China, Russia. They have now various viruses such as that, even more complex probably.
Oh, Mr. Soong, we have to go back
and
to...
hackers.
We have to get back to...
No, but this is your life and my life.
We have to go back to Ed Snowden for a second.
Ed Snowden was part of this. He was the last job he had was he was an offensive hacker for the NSA.
And now he's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He's receiving the Ossietzky Prize here in Norway in November for free speech and all of that. Well deserved, do you think?
Will he what?
Well deserved.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I think that's a nice fantasy. It makes for good headlines. I don't think that addresses the issue. There's no chance the United States government would want that, allow it, or acknowledge it. They're quite willing to give a Nobel Peace Prize to Obama, who starts 4 wars and bombs like 7 Muslim countries and starts drone warfare on a scale unheard of.
So it's not worth anything.
What's it mean anymore?
It doesn't mean anything.
It'd be nice to make up for Obama and give it to Snowden. That'd be great, but it's too ironic for most people to understand. Going back to security, they don't provide security versus freedom. That's a false equivalence. Security the Americans have provided has failed in most instances. 9/11 is a case. The NSA had signals following certain hijackers. They did not give them the FBI. The FBI had many leads from their own agents in the field saying these pilots are studying, are learning how to be pilots, etc. No follow-up from the FBI central headquarters. CIA had information, they give it to Bush. Bush ignores the information. So that's what security is about. Security is about good work. They did not do it, and all they wanted was more money to build more stuff, and there's no evidence that they actually can use it well. So I don't think it works. There's no security to be had with any government, and if you trust the government to provide you security, there's something wrong with you, because you should really understand that it's your own choice to give up your life.
I understand you were really driven to do this movie because you talk so eagerly about it. Did you have any troubles with funding your movie in America?
No money. U.S. Major studios wanted nothing to do with it. They liked the script, they liked the actors, but when it went upstairs to the corporate boards that run these places, stockholders, lawyers, they always say no. I mean, it's too controversial for them, which is sad.
So basically they said it's un-American?
Well, they're saying that. I think it's pretty stupid because, it's like the McCarthy era when the House of Un-American Activities, un-American.
Was it a little bit like that?
Yes, of course it is. Un-American, anti-American are fascist terms. Only a government, a tyrannical, authoritarian government would even use those terms. So it's a very sick time now because since 9/11, Mr. Bush overreacted and put such fear into America. It's like 1984, frankly. You flash on the screen Osama bin Laden, fear, fear, terror, terror. You put it in the American people's head over and over again. And as Snowden says in the movie, you put out a security system that's completely overreaching itself, but the real reason is not terrorism, it's social and economic control of the planet.
But I understand you were so eager to do this movie, even decided against going home to your own mother's funeral to...
No, it didn't work that way, on the contrary. My mom knew my mom knew that she was dying, and I said my farewell before I left. She knew that I couldn't stop the film. If I had stopped the film for 4 days to fly back to the United States from Germany, we would have lost the scenes. It wouldn't have been possible. We didn't have the money, the margin to complete.
But it goes to show that you really put an effort into it.
No, it was just, I'm a professional. And Mom knew. I talked to her a couple of nights before. She really wanted to get out of here. She was relieved.
It's been said by someone in America, I think, love your country, hate your government's policies. Does that apply to you?
There's no dictate. I mean, I think some government policies work, absolutely. And I hope they continue to work. But when our country goes to war repeatedly, and incites war and exaggerates the enemy into 1984 proportions. Do you remember Hate Week? Everybody yells Hate Week, and they go out and they see a picture of the next leader. Well, we've had one after the other. Since the Soviet Union fell, we had Mr. Noriega. We invaded Panama. Right. Then we put Mr. Hussein as the new Hitler, and we got him. And then it was, and then of course it was Osama bin Laden. Now it's Mr. Putin. There's always somebody who they exaggerate into a massive enemy of the country and get the people worked up.
But in my generation, we brought up to believe that America is a benevolent superpower.
Yes, we're brought up that way. Me too. I was brought up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't apply anymore.
No. No, the gloves are off. They're very good at soft power being, creating the myth of that. We're for freedom, we're for everybody's, but the dollar runs the show. The dollar controls the world, and they want to continue to be unrivaled number one. That says so in their policy. The neoconservatives run a lot of Washington, and they said we shall be the number one country in the world, but we will not be unrivaled in our power. If an ally emerges, such as Russia, China, that is a threat. That is a threat to our national interest. That's a crazy kind of dialogue, you see.
Do you think it will change that attitude with the election coming up?
Well, not this election, no, because both candidates have talked tough about enhancing that power, enhancing the surveillance system, spending more money, kicking ass, the kind of Bush talk that it seems that American political candidates feel they need to. You cannot get up there and offer a policy of peace, it seems. There's no peace party. The Democrats used to be some version of it. George McGovern comes to mind, or Jimmy Carter. But I don't see it anymore. It's not possible. We need a peace candidate badly in our country.
You simply don't buy into the way the U.S. is portraying their enemies. We've seen that in several of your movies. I remember watching Platoon, one of the greatest anti-war movies.
Thank you.
I ever saw. I have to give that to you. And also JFK. You didn't buy everything that they said about how he was. John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Don't get me started on that.
I won't get you started. But is that a stream of consciousness with you that you always question these things?
No, I look for evidence. I do a lot of research. I'm not out there on looking for the next cause. I'm a filmmaker. I want to make a good story, but I don't want to tell a lie. You tell me if I tell a lie, I'm going to be embarrassed, and I'll be the first one to admit it's wrong, but I haven't heard any evidence to the contrary. So what I see is, to the contrary, if you go deep in anything, you might find another story there. Don't go with the headlines that are groupthink that goes around the world, you know, like NATO has to be expanded into 13 countries. There was no need to expand NATO.
But you make
I know
documentaries
Norway's thinking
also.
about doing more for NATO.
Right. But you make documentaries also that has been somewhat controversial. The Fidel Castro thing and
Fidel Castro, Mr. Chavez,
and Chavez.
7 other Latin American leaders, part of the Socialist Revolution.
But do you find it hard?
And The Untold History of the United States.
Right,
the
documentary series. We aired it here. But do you find it difficult sometimes to differ between fact and fiction?
Not at all, no. Untold History of the United States is a documentary. It's all fact-checked. It was a book we wrote.
But going back and forth between...
I go back and forth, yes.
Yeah.
Now, those documentaries, the interviews with Castro, et cetera, that's not fact. That's a live interview. I go to these places and I talk to them. And by the way, if they are the enemy of the United States, which is so often claimed, and they're exaggerated into dictators beyond belief, let us watch them. Watch these documentaries and at least be open to listening to who your enemy is. You might know him better. Don't you agree with that? Makes sense. Well,
but do they get airtime in the States?
No, they don't. Most south of the border did. It did, but the Castro was pulled back from the air by HBO with 2 weeks to go because of the protests and their subscription base from the Cuban right-wingers in America, many of whom wrote in an organized protest. So it's very difficult to get these kind of stories on the air. Untold History made it onto a Showtime cable system, a big one, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful. I couldn't do that in any other country.
Aired here
I mean, you couldn't do it in most countries of the world. But I'm very grateful for the free speech we have in America.
That's an American virtue, at least.
You don't understand that I am American.
I do understand you're
I really
American.
want to, and I'm like Snowden. I feel strongly that our country could be honest about things and really be a better country.
Is that also an American virtue, to ask those hard questions towards your government?
If that's only American, I would think it would be true in most countries. But yes, I think people care. And most people don't care, yes, because America is a consumer paradise. We have many electronic goods, materialism, cars. So, you know, people get distracted by all that stuff.
There were other movies about real people that you wanted to make, from Hank Williams to Martin Luther King.
That was a while ago. Yeah, Hank Williams, that was a while ago. Yeah, Martin Luther King is a great story. Again, America...
And the My Lai Massacre.
The My Lai Massacre is a
wonderful
wonderful
story.
story.
Those movies never...
Again, controversy around them. With the King story, which is about the last 3 years of his life, America prefers a sanitized history of King, which is the man they see, and I love that man, but there's a human being there. He's not a martyr. And what I wanted to do in the last 3 years of his life, he had the most amount of pressure because he broadened his campaign from civil rights into poverty campaign as well as a Vietnam War campaign. Those two buttons hit off. It really was too much, and he got more pressure than ever. And frankly, I think he turned closer to God. If there anything was true about that man, he was a religious man. I think he really felt closer than ever to God because he knew he was on the road to the end, to death.
It sounds like you're still going to make that
movie. It's a great
movie.
story. No, the family, there's adultery in it. There's all the usual human traits. It's not Jesus. But the family and Coretta King, I mean, it was all a problem back then. I don't want to go back into that.
But what is next for you?
And the My Lai Massacre was a great movie because that happened, as we know, and it was worse than anybody remembers. It's like 500 dead. But it's about an attitude towards war and how war makes men and women callous. We accept war, and once you do that, it coarsens your soul. And that's what happened to so many of the men over there started killing people in cold blood, men, women, children. What did you ask? I'm sorry.
Are you a man on a mission, Mr. Stone?
I'm a man on a mission when I'm in a 28-minute program, and I only have so many seconds to speak. So I sound like a demonic, but actually I'm quite enjoyable, and I'd love to have a drink with you.
We can do that. But what next for you now?
What's next? I don't really generally talk about what I'm going to do next. I'm getting old, getting tireder.
They say 70 is the new 40, isn't that what I say?
That's right, 70 is the new 40, sure. But honestly, I would love to do something good that stands with the rest of my work. I'm proud of it. But this controversy stuff, whatever. In the United States, Snowden is still regarded as a guy who gave away the secrets. People don't want to go beyond that. I guess I have to challenge all assumptions, that I can.
Well, I'm sure there will be another controversial film.
I don't look for a controversy. I told you that at the beginning.
No, but still they turn out to be controversial.
Why not?
Which is probably a good thing, isn't it?
Why not do a love story,
Yeah, maybe not. Next time, a love story from Oliver Stone. Thanks very much, Mr.
Thank you, Ole.
For coming on the show. Appreciate it. And next week, om en uke har vi en ny interessant gjest her i programmet. Velkommen tilbake da, og ha en fortsatt riktig god aften.